The Central Business Association here in El Paso works to advocate everyday issues such as retail vacancies, bridge wait times, and accessibility to businesses. It partners with other entities such as Sun Metro and the El Paso Chamber of Commerce. It's not every day that a congressman from New Mexico visits the El Paso Central Business Association. And joining us now is New Mexico Congressman Steve Pearce to talk a little bit more about his visit to El Paso. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
Yeah, that kind of caught us all off guard a little bit to hear that you were in El Paso to talk about and to talk with the Central Business Association. Talk about your visit.
Well, I just always believe that cooperation is better, and the broader the cooperation and the more effect we're going to have. In this case, El Paso, New Mexico, southern New Mexico, Doña Ana County, Otero County, we all share similar fates. Military is a big one, and so Congressman O'Rourke and I have been working to protect our bases, because if we lose one, we lose both on both sides of the border. It's a huge economic driver, but it's also extremely important for national security, so two great reasons to support it. Cross-border trade, working with Mexico waters. I just absolutely believe that that we're going to do more if we're working together, see that those ports are working effectively. Wait times are bad for the economy in this area. So it was here talking about cooperation across state lines.
And was it a good message? Were you able to share that things are getting better?
Absolutely.
That synergy's working?
Yes, absolutely. And we just talked about the movement of Santa Teresa, the refueling yards out of El Paso to Santa Teresa. That was like a 12-year project, and it has resulted in good activity here. You all have gained some valuable space there. It's been good for New Mexico. So yes, the cooperation is working well.
Sounds like it's good for our economy. For those who don't know, you represent District 2, southern part of New Mexico. Talk a little bit about Veterans Affairs. You touched on it a little bit right there about the military aspect. You were talking about a big reform bill you guys passed this summer, but the VA is struggling to implement some of those changes.
That's right. All of Americans got angry last April when they saw the veterans dying on these wait lists. They weren't even being clocked into the system in order to understate the problem, and Americans got furious. Washington actually responded in record time, in about 3 months, a deep reform bill, and it was passed by the House, the Senate, signed by the President. And so everyone thought, okay, now then we're going to start getting into better VA treatment for our veterans. No way. They're now saying, they're finding reasons every day saying, well, they haven't been instructed exactly how to go about it. You have to call the 800 number. You have to do this. You can't do that. And so Friday we're going to have the head of the Albuquerque VA come in and address veterans straight on. Find that when they get to talk to the veterans rather than get to talk to me, the actions get a little bit better. We're going to do the same thing with the El Paso clinic here and the hospital here at some point, but right now we're just concentrating on New Mexico. We ask young men and women to go into harm's way, make the ultimate sacrifice if necessary. The least we can do is provide the services that we offer them.
So the idea is to maybe get the middleman, meaning a representative, out of the way and let them speak directly to these veterans and hear their stories.
And we've been doing this for about 5 years now, and it is extremely effective. But we've got changes in both areas, new people in place. We've got that new law in place. So we're going to keep pressing on the issue, make sure that we get the treatment that all Americans think our veterans should get.
A lot of people talking about ISIS and what's going on there, and we know the president recently asked for authorization for the use of force against ISIS. Talk about your stance on that issue.
Well, I think that we absolutely should be fighting ISIS, but my response when they send us that authorization is where you're going to get the people. I think most Americans have seen the American Sniper. You see the effect of repeated deployments on the life, and that young man was very strong. And people who know him personally tell me that is a very accurate portrayal of what was going on in his life, that was stretching him to the limits. So we're asking young men and women to go repeatedly into the war zone, and now then the president's asking for more at a time when he's decreasing the force strength down. And so I'm saying, where are you going to get the people? I introduced a resolution the day after he asked for the authorization, and I think it's one of the essential questions. I think we should be fighting ISIS, but I don't think we should be tapping our soldiers harder and harder, deploying them more and more, and extracting that pain from their families and them individually.
So no boots on the ground would be your preference?
No, I don't mind boots on the ground. I think the Arab nations must lead, and I think that we're there as a strong backbone, helping with logistics and helping with some of the air power that they might not have. You saw the King of Jordan go home and personally lead that bombing attack after they burned that pilot alive, the Jordanian pilot. I think it's going to take that bold action on the part of the Arabs, the moderate Arabs, to overcome this threat, but they can't do it alone. So I'm willing to help. But then you got the basic question, where are we going to get the people from at a time where the president is cutting the size of our forces?
Another issue you've been bumping heads with the president on has to do with his immigration reform, his presidential powers he took. He said he had the right to do it, and he implemented some immigration reform, basically shielding about 4 to 5 million immigrants living here, undocumented immigrants living here in the United States. Just recently, an editorial was written in the Las Cruces News about you're voting no for funding of Homeland Security because you didn't want that funding to happen unless he pulled back the immigration reform, correct? But we'll let you talk about that. Let me just read a couple of quotes from that piece. Again, this was an editorial that accused you of throwing sand into the gears of the government. It goes on to say, what makes this latest act so maddening is that Pearce and others are willing to shut down the Department of Homeland Security to prevent Obama from doing something he has already been prevented by the courts from doing. It then goes on to say, GOP leaders in the House and Senate are desperate to end the dysfunction and prove they can govern effectively. Pearce and a handful of House Republicans appear determined not to allow that to happen. I want to mention this appeared in the Las Cruces News. It was also picked up in here in the El Paso Times as well. What is your take on that editorial?
Oh, the editorial, I think, comes in with a distinct bias to start with. We put a bill in front of the Senate as soon as we got back, fully funding DHS. We weeded out what the president has done. He says against the law. We said it's against the law, and now the courts have said it's against the law. All three branches say it. The Senate Democrats obstructed that bill for 4 weeks. Where were the editorials when the Senate Democrats were obstructing the conversation? We had plenty of time to work the problems out, and so I think the editorial was biased to start with. I'm fine with what they said, but I don't think it's true. The second thing is that the elections in the fall had nothing to do with reaffirming Republican politics. What they did is say that we need someone to be a check and a balance against the president who is acting unilaterally. Unilaterally in many regards. They find it to be a little unsettling. They don't really, I don't think the voters, not the hundreds of millions that vote, don't log in and vote for specific policies. They vote for big trends, and they wanted us to be attention against his unilateral actions, those actions that are outside the Constitution and outside the law. And so I think if we didn't take that on, we'd be held accountable by the people who elected us. I think they expect for us to push back when someone finds themselves outside the law. And the president himself said, I am not the emperor. Does the Las Cruces Sun now believe that he is the emperor, that he can act unilaterally? So I don't know. I'm interested in what they say, but I also believe that there are very strong points for voting no.
Before I let you go quickly, we talk a lot about Republicans now in control of Congress. A lot of talk about defunding Obamacare. The immigration battle is still ongoing, as you said. The courts have temporarily put that on hold, but that's something he's going to fight in the courts. But that being said, where is the focus? What is the push for Republicans? What do they want to do as opposed to fighting? What do they want to push for?
Well, I think you saw that right off the bat. The Keystone Pipeline tells everyone in the nation that we're interested in the jobs. Again, the system worked pretty well at that point. We sent a bill over that was pretty Republican from the House. Democrats said, okay, we need to debate the bill in the Senate. They let it come to the Senate floor. They added Democrat amendments that we would never have agreed to in the House, but because we understood that was part of the process, and we wanted the president to get the bill, we approved that. I voted for those Senate amendments because it was the system working. And so that has to do with jobs. The president vetoed that with some explanation. It didn't seem to make sense. But I think people are worried about jobs, and I think that's where you'll see our focus is. Yes, we need to be funding the government, and we need to fund it adequately, but we can't just step aside from these discussions when the president says he's going to act without Congress. It's not the way our system is set up. You know, we have a system of checks and balances that have worked throughout our history. I think that's one of the key discussions. But they had more votes in the Senate already on one bill than they had the entire last year. So the process is working. And is it working perfectly? No, I don't think it's ever going to work perfectly. But it's representing the people out here. The people out here don't have one mind about the issues. When they align like they did on that VA bill, the system works very quickly.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Congressman Pearce, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Again, Congressman Pearce from the 2nd Congressional District in New Mexico. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. We'll be right back with more news after the break.